I never liked camping alone, but I did it sometimes. There's something about the quiet that clears your head. No calls, no emails, no people. Just you and the woods. The summer I turned 33, I took a week off work and drove 6 hours north into a forested part of the state where cell service dropped out and the towns were nothing more than a gas station and a church. The land up there is mostly logging property, owned by private companies. You're not really supposed to camp on it, but people do. I'd found a place years ago. Flat, dry, hidden from the road. It was a 2-mile hike in no trail. You had to know where to cut off from the old logging road and which ridge to follow. I brought everything in with me. Tent, food, tools, water filter. I even brought a flare gun and a first aid kit, though I'd never used either. I parked the truck around noon and made the hike in just under an hour. It was hot, over 90, and the bugs were already thick. I set up camp the way I always did, with the tent facing the small creek and a ring of stones I'd arranged years ago for fires. Nothing felt off. Not at first. That night, I cooked a freeze-dried meal over my little stove and sat on a rock to eat. I wasn't worried about bears. This part of the state didn't have many. I kept my food in a bear canister and stored it 50 feet away, just to be sure. When the sun went down, I crawled into the tent and lay there, listening to the crickets and frogs. But something was different this time. Couldn't relax. I lay there, eyes wide, heart ticking faster than it should have. I told myself it was just the usual nerves. Your body stays on edge the first night alone in the woods. You're used to walls and locks, not nylon and zippers. But even as I thought that, I realized I wasn't hearing any owls. No movement in the trees either. Just the sound of the creek and insects. I eventually fell asleep, but I kept waking up. Half dreams full of branches snapping and shapes outside the tent. I'd shoot up, grab my flashlight, and look around, but there was never anything there. The next morning, I hiked a few miles north to check on an old beaver dam I remembered. It was still there, mostly. The water was lower than I expected. On the way back, I found fresh tire tracks on one of the old logging roads that had been overgrown last time I was there. That gave me pause. The tracks weren't from an ATV, they were wider, like a truck. And they weren't there when I came through the day before. That night, I kept my fire small. I didn't like the idea of someone else out here. These forests stretch for miles with no cell towers, no rangers, no hikers. If something happened, you'd be on your own. I didn't want to draw attention. I lay in the tent again, not sleeping. That's when I heard it, around 2 in the morning. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching over dry pine needles. I held my breath. My tent has a mesh top, so if there's moonlight, you can see out a little. I didn't see anything, but I could hear the steps. Not an animal. Too heavy, too even. Human. They stopped near the creek. I didn't move. I didn't even grab my light. I just lay there, counting the seconds in my head. Then I heard a splash. Whoever it was had stepped into the water. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours. Finally, I must have dozed off. I woke again at dawn. The fire pit looked untouched. My food was where I left it. Nothing was missing. I checked the ground near the creek and found footprints, boots, size 11 maybe. I wear size 9. The prints came down the hill from the trees, then turned and followed the creek east. No prints coming in from the direction I arrived. I didn't pack up. I should have, but I didn't. I told myself maybe it was another camper who passed through and didn't see my tent. Maybe a hunter scouting the area. But I knew that wasn't true. No one hikes 2 miles off-road just to pass through a creek at 2 a.m. I spent the day unsettled, listening for movement. Every snapped twig made my heart jump. I kept my knife on me all day. I didn't fish or explore. I just sat near the fire pit and waited for night. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat up in the tent with the light off, holding my flare gun. I kept listening. Around midnight, the wind picked up. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. This time slower. Closer. I lay flat and peeked out. There was movement, low, crouched, not walking straight. It circled the camp, staying just outside the trees. It was careful, deliberate. Then it disappeared. I waited hours. When the light started changing, I crawled out, stiff and cold. I packed up everything fast. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just packed. Then I saw it. A second set of footprints. Smaller this time. Size 8, maybe. The bigger ones had returned too. They'd circled the tent. One had come within a foot of the nylon while I was inside. There was even a smudge where a hand had brushed the fabric. I left the site just after sunrise. I took a different route out, following the creek east until I hit a different road. I didn't want to go back the way I came. I hiked hard, non-stop, until I reached the gravel road, and from there I followed it until I found where the truck tracks had gone. I figured they'd lead me close to a trailhead. They did, but what I found made my skin crawl. The tire tracks led to a clearing that had once been a log deck, an area where felled trees were stored. There was a truck there, a rusted, dirty pickup with no plates. The back was full of tools, chains, rope, buckets. I didn't look too closely. What stopped me cold was the tent nearby. It was hidden behind some fallen branches, barely visible. Camouflaged. Inside was a sleeping bag, food wrappers, an empty bottle of vodka, and a map. The map had markings all over it, circles, dates. Some were from earlier that summer. Some were from this week. One of them was today's date, with an X over the area where I'd camped. There were no people there when I arrived. I didn't wait around. I kept walking down the road until I saw a service gate and hiked around it until I found the main highway. A logging truck passed and gave me a ride back to my truck, which was untouched. I drove straight home, 6 hours south, sweating the whole way. I didn't stop to eat. I didn't even listen to music, just drove. Every mile farther from those woods felt like peeling a weight off my chest. That night, in my apartment, I locked the doors and slept with a knife under my pillow. I told myself it was over, that whoever was out there hadn't followed me, that it was just a fluke, a run-in with squatters or criminals or something else I didn't understand. I didn't sleep well. A week later, I read a story online. A missing hiker, female, mid-20s, last seen near the logging roads in the same region. Her car had been found at the same trailhead I'd used. No sign of her since. They never found her body. They never found who was out there either. I don't go into the woods alone anymore. I sold my gear. I sold the truck. I moved to the city. I keep a light on at night, even in my new apartment, 5th floor, locked tight. And I never stop thinking about those prints outside my tent. The handprint on the fabric, the X on that map, the fact that someone knew I was there, knew I was alone, knew I wasn't armed. Someone had watched me for days, planned something, and for some reason they didn't go through with it. That part haunts me the most. Not the fear I felt, not the escape, but the not knowing why. Why they let me go, what changed their mind, or if they were just waiting for a better moment. Cleaner one. There's no ending to this, not really. Just a memory that doesn't go away. A lesson carved into me like a scar. The woods don't care about you, and neither do the people who choose to live in them. I was always into the abandoned places thing, not for clout or photos. I didn't even post. It was just a way to get out, feel something different. I liked the silence in old places, the peeling walls, the collapsed ceilings, that quiet that comes from time moving on without people. Cities forget buildings. Nature eats them slowly. It's not romantic like movies make it out to be. It smells like rot and piss, and there's broken glass everywhere. But it was something that made me feel grounded. There was this church out near the edge of a state forest about 45 minutes from where I lived. Not marked on any urban exploration maps I'd seen, not tagged on Instagram. I found it just scrolling through old satellite images one day. You'd never see it from the road. Trees had overgrown the whole thing. The main highway passed 2 miles south, and the side road closest to it was nearly impassable, all rutted and washed out. I had to leave my car a good walk out and hoof it in through woods. But when I first saw the building, I knew it was something different. It was massive, at least 3 stories tall, with these spires half collapsed and a roof that had sunk inward in the middle. No signs left, just a stone building stripped down to bones. Ivy up the sides, windows broken or boarded from the inside. Brick was stained black in places. It looked like it had been burned, or maybe just rotted from rain over decades. I didn't go in the first time, just circled it, took in the size of it. I found one window in the back where the boards had come loose, enough to squeeze through. I marked the spot and went back the next weekend, this time with a light, a knife, and a better backpack. Brought gloves and boots too. Didn't want to catch anything from needles or rusted nails. That time I went in. The air hit me first. You don't forget the way old rot smells. Dry mold, wood decay, dead animals somewhere deep inside. But there was something else in there too. Something coppery and sharper, like metal or dried blood. The kind of smell you get in a butcher's freezer. The inside was all shadows and ruin. Pews stacked in the corners, warped from water damage. Walls stripped of paint, watermarks running down them in brown streaks. Bits of insulation and plaster covered the floor like snowfall. I kept my light low. I don't know why. Maybe it felt like I wasn't supposed to be there, like the building was holding its breath. Most of the place was empty. Some graffiti here and there. A dead raccoon in one room, bones and dried skin. I passed a room that had been an office or something. Papers and old hymnals scattered, all soaked through and fused together. The air was thick with dust. Then I got to the second floor. That's where I saw it. It was this open space near the middle, like a chapel within the chapel. The walls were rounded, and the floor had this big circular motif in it. Dark wood, raised a bit from the rest of the floor. Like a podium or stage had been there, long since torn out. But the circle stayed. In the middle of the circle was blood. Fresh blood. Not old, not brown, not dry. Red. Shiny. Pooled and smeared like something had been dragged across it. It wasn't a lot, not like a slaughter, but enough to stop me cold. This wasn't leftovers from years ago. This was recent. The edges of the blood had dried slightly, but the center still looked wet. I leaned in, careful not to step in it, and caught the smell. Sharp, raw, unmistakable. Something or someone had bled out there. There weren't signs of a struggle.
No prints.
No tools or bags or anything. Just the stain and that empty ring in the floor. Like whatever happened had happened fast. Or like someone had cleaned up everything but the blood. I didn't want to stay long. I took a quick photo, more for my own memory than anything. Then I backed off. My skin felt tight all over, like something was wrong and my body knew it before I did. I moved on from the second floor, heading toward the stairs down. There were signs of movement in the dust, boot prints smaller than mine, and more than one set. Not fresh enough to be that day, but not old either. Someone had been here recently. Someone else had seen that blood or maybe caused it. I reached the stairs to the basement. They were wooden and narrow, creaked with every step. The air changed as I went down, colder, more stale. The smell of mold turned sour. The light from above faded fast, and my flashlight started picking up the dampness on the walls. Water had seeped through the stone, leaving black veins all down the concrete. The basement was low, barely 7 feet tall, and divided by thick support columns. There were piles of wood, some old filing cabinets, even a rusted cart on wheels like you'd see in a hospital. It was quiet, dead quiet. Even my own footsteps felt muffled. Then I heard it, running, upstairs. Fast, heavy steps. I froze. My body went into full adrenaline, legs locked, chest seized up. Someone was up there, not walking, running. The footsteps pounded across the ceiling above me, fast, back and forth. I killed my flashlight. Dumb, I know, but I didn't want to be seen from above. I just stood in that dark, crouched behind a pillar, heart hammering in my ears. The footsteps didn't sound like panic. They didn't leave the building. They just moved, like someone was pacing hard or searching. They stopped, just cut off. No fading out, just silence. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, still nothing. I turned my light back on, slow, scanned the basement. Nothing moved.
No breathing, no footsteps.
Just the wet walls and rusted junk. Then I noticed something off. A door half open, set into the wall, past the old heating unit. The paint was newer, the hinges cleaner than the rest of the room. Someone had added it. It hadn't been there when the church was first built. I moved toward it slowly, Every bone in my body told me not to, but I had to see. Inside was a smaller room, not finished, just raw stone walls, dirt floor. But in the center was a crate, big, wooden, heavy-looking, open. Inside the crate were bones. Animal bones, mostly. Deer, maybe some pig. Some cleaned, some still with skin and tissue stuck to them. One had fur. Next to the crate was a black trash bag. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. The smell told me enough. I backed out of that room and didn't stop. I climbed the stairs slow, listening. But it was quiet again. Too quiet. I crossed the second floor fast, keeping my light low, checking every corner. Nothing. No people. No more footsteps. I got back to the window I came through and crawled out into the woods. I didn't stop until I hit the car. Got in, locked the doors, and just sat there for a while, breathing. When I got home, I looked at the photo again. The blood circle, the way it pooled in the cracks of the wood. And I realized something. There were more stains, older, less visible. The same pattern under the fresh blood. Like this wasn't the first time. I didn't go to the cops. What would I tell them? I was trespassing in a condemned building and found blood and bones? They'd shrug it off. No body, no crime. But I never forgot that place. Weeks later, I checked satellite images again. Tried to find the church again. But it was gone. The satellite updated, and the roof had collapsed fully. Just rubble and trees now. Like it never existed. But I know what I saw. I know what I smelled. I don't think it was a cult. Not satanic or anything. That's what people always say. But most of the time it's just people. Sick people. Some guy or group using that space for something awful. Could have been trafficking. Could have been hunting. Could have just been someone broken in the head. But it was real. That blood was real. That basement was real. The footsteps were real. I stopped exploring after that. Sold off most of my gear. I still check maps sometimes. Still drive back roads just to see. But I don't go in anymore. Not after that. Because here's what I know. Once a place gets forgotten long enough, something else moves in. Not ghosts. Not spirits. Just people who want to stay forgotten. And they don't want to be found. Especially not in the middle of the night. In a church that no one remembers. With blood on the floor and someone running above you when you're all alone in the dark. It was just after 2:30 in the morning when I left work. I'd stayed way later than I planned. One of those nights where everything just drags. Printer jams, late shipments, computer crashes, you name it. I was the last one out of the building, and even the overnight janitor had gone home early because his kid was sick or something. I'd been on my feet too long. My shoulders ached, my back was tight, and my eyes felt like they were full of sand. I hadn't eaten since lunch, and my stomach was letting me know it. But all I cared about was getting home, taking off my boots, and collapsing into bed. The drive from work to home usually took 45 minutes, give or take. I lived way out, way past the edge of town. Cheaper out there, quieter too. It was the kind of place where the neighbors were a quarter mile away, and the only light at night came from porch bulbs or the moon. No traffic.
No street lights.
Just long stretches of road between tree lines and empty fields. Most nights I liked the drive. It gave me time to decompress. A buffer between the mess of work and the stillness of home. But that night didn't feel like most nights. Maybe it was how tired I was. Or maybe it was how the sky looked. Thick clouds, no moon, no stars. Everything just felt heavier, colder. Even with the heat on low, the air inside the car felt stale, so I cracked the windows. That helped a little. The cold bit at my face and helped me stay alert, at least for a while. My eyes still kept wanting to close, and I found myself blinking too long, drifting too close to the shoulder. The route home was the same every time. Out past the warehouse district, past the last gas station that stayed open all night, and onto the back roads. These weren't highways, just narrow, two-lane strips of pavement that wound through the woods and farmland. No shoulders, just a lip of gravel and then ditches or brush. The kind of roads that hadn't been repaved in years. I knew every bump, every bend, every place where deer liked to cross. I didn't usually worry out there, but I stayed alert. especially this time of year. Late fall, cold nights, animals moved differently. I was about a mile from home when it happened. I'd just come around a bend, one I knew well. Sharp curve left, a little blind spot on the right where the trees crowd the road. I took it like I always did, hugging the inside edge just a bit, easing off the gas. And that's when I saw her, a woman, running out of the woods. No warning, just an explosion of movement from the trees. She crashed through the brush and staggered onto the road like she'd been shoved. I remember how her arms flailed, how she screamed. A real scream, not just yelling. A scream that tore through the quiet like metal on metal. She was thin, clothes torn, blood on her face, on her shirt, smeared down her arms. She stumbled right into my headlights. I had less than 2 seconds to react. I swerved, hard. Tires screamed. I pulled left, just missing her. The ditch came up fast, but I managed to jerk the wheel back right and correct in time. The car fishtailed but held. I came to a stop about 100 feet up, heart slamming in my chest so hard I felt dizzy. For a few seconds, I just sat there gripping the wheel, breathing like I just sprinted up a hill. My mouth was dry, and my hands were shaking. And then the shock gave way to something else. She was hurt, really hurt, and alone. I looked in the mirror and saw her still standing there in the middle of the road, barely lit by my brake lights. Her head kept jerking back toward the woods, like she was watching for something, or someone. She started walking toward me, limping. One arm clutched her ribs. Her face looked pale and tight like she was barely holding it together. I grabbed my phone, threw the car in reverse, and backed up fast. Window down, door open. I kept the engine running. The dome light kicked on as I opened the door. She limped faster toward me now. Closer up, she looked worse. Barefoot, cuts on her legs, blood down one side of her face, hair matted and full of leaves. Her breathing was fast, shallow, like she couldn't get enough air. She got in without a word, just dropped into the passenger seat and pulled the door shut. I smelled blood, sweat, dirt, like she'd been out there for hours, running, hiding. I didn't even ask questions, just put the car in drive and punched it. I told the dispatcher where we were, what I saw. She asked if I could stay on scene. I told her no chance, because just before we turned the bend, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw something. A shape, a man, tall, walking fast along the edge of the woods, not shouting, not running, just moving with purpose. He was coming from the direction she came from, no doubt about it. I told the dispatcher that too, told her I wasn't stopping. She said police would meet us at the hospital. I didn't even hang up. I dropped the phone into the cup holder and kept driving. Faster than I ever had on those roads. I didn't slow down for the corners. Didn't stop at the four-way that nobody uses after midnight. Just kept my foot on the gas and both hands on the wheel. My pulse was thumping in my ears. The woman was curled up in the seat beside me, arms wrapped around her knees. Blood smeared on the door, the seat, my jacket. Her breath came in shallow, broken gasps. She hadn't said a word. The road blurred by. Trees whipped past in the dark, and I kept checking the mirrors. Every shadow looked like it moved. Every curve made me hold my breath. The hospital came into view like a lighthouse. Bright, sterile lights against the black sky. I pulled into the emergency entrance, hazard lights flashing, tires squealing as I braked hard. She opened her own door and stumbled inside. Nurses met her. Police followed a minute later. I parked properly and waited. Gave my statement. Every word. Every detail. I didn't care how late it was. They took photos of my car. I let them. I didn't clean a thing. I wanted it on record. I wanted it known that she hadn't been alone out there. After they finished, I just sat in the waiting room. Not because they needed me. They told me I could go, but I couldn't. Not yet. I felt like I was still out there in the dark, still watching those trees, still listening for footsteps behind me. An hour passed, maybe more. Eventually, one of the officers came back and said they got him. Her boyfriend, that's what they called him. But the way they said it, I could tell there was more. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know all the details. I already knew enough. Enough to see her face in my mind every time I blinked. Enough to know I'd be thinking about that scream for a long time. I drove home just before dawn. The road was empty, sky starting to shift from black to gray. Cold still clung to the windows, and the woods were quiet. But it wasn't peaceful. Every shadow felt closer. Every rustle in the brush made my chest tighten. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time. I didn't move, just stared at the woods across the field and tried to breathe normal again. The birds had started chirping, the kind of soft, early calls that come before full light. The sky was the color of steel wool, dim, heavy. I looked down at my jacket, blood dried stiff on the sleeve, smears on the console, the seat, my door. Eventually, I went inside, didn't turn on lights, didn't take off my boots, just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. My heart was still going too fast. My ears rang in the silence. I thought about that stretch of road, that bend, the way she came out of the trees like she'd been spit out by the earth itself. I kept wondering what would have happened if I'd left work on time, if I hadn't swerved in time, if I just kept driving and pretended I didn't see her. I didn't sleep that morning. Couldn't. I lay on top of the covers fully dressed, boots still on, jacket still dirty. The sun came up slowly, warming the side of the house. The world moved on, but I didn't. Not yet. Days passed. I went back to work, drove that road again, passed the bend again, slowed down every time. Every time I looked toward the trees, half expecting to see something. Her, him, nothing. They said he was going away for a long time. What he did to her. They didn't tell me the full story, but I saw it on her. The bruises, the cuts, the way she flinched at every sound, the way she kept looking over her shoulder like something was still hunting her. I don't know her name, don't know where she is now, but I hope she's safe. I hope she's far from here. That road doesn't feel the same anymore. I used to like it, the peace, the quiet. Now it feels like it remembers, like it holds onto that night the way I do. I still live there, still take that same drive. But every time I hit that curve, I see her again. Blood, panic, that scream, the blur of trees, the shape in the mirror. And I remember what could have happened. But I also remember this. I stopped, and she's alive. And sometimes in a world like this, that's enough. I don't tell many people this story, not because it's unbelievable. There's nothing supernatural about it. No ghosts, no monsters, just people. And sometimes that's worse. I don't tell it often because even now, years later, the memory of that night still hits me in a way I can't shake off. Like it's still somewhere behind me, just out of sight. I was living out in the woods back then, deep in rural Mississippi. The kind of place where even Google Maps gives up halfway down the road. My driveway was almost a mile long from the main dirt path, and even that main path didn't see more than 5 cars on a good night. There were no streetlights, no neighbors you could see through the trees, and no cell signal unless you stood on a hill behind the house and held your phone just right. I liked it that way. Peace and quiet were what I wanted. I'd moved there about 2 years earlier. Bought the place from a friend of my uncle's who passed away. It was cheap, remote, and needed work, nothing I couldn't handle. I had a few tools, a beat-up Chevy, and a stubborn kind of attitude. Fixed the roof, patched the porch, cut firewood when I needed to, and made myself a simple life. On most days, I'd hear nothing but birds and wind. On most nights, not even that. Just the sound of the forest slowly breathing in the dark. Being robbed out there never crossed my mind. Who would bother? You'd burn half a tank of gas just getting there. I didn't have anything worth taking anyway. No TV, no fancy gear, just an old rifle, a worn mattress, and the kind of freedom that makes you forget what a lock even feels like. My closest neighbor was 5 miles away. If I screamed, no one would hear it. But I never felt afraid. Until that night. It was late summer, probably mid-August. I remember because the bugs were still thick in the air, and the heat hadn't broken yet. I was up late, sitting on the porch with a beer, just watching the tree lean and listening to the hum of the woods. Around 11 or so, I stood up to head inside when I saw headlights flash through the trees. Now that was odd. Like I said, hardly anyone ever came down that road, especially not that late. At first, I thought maybe someone had taken a wrong turn, maybe a lost hunter or someone trying to cut across to Highway 12. But the lights didn't move like someone who was lost. They were steady, slow, deliberate. Then the lights disappeared. That's when my stomach tightened. They hadn't turned around. They'd just gone dark. I walked back inside and turned off my porch light, moved behind the window and peeked through the curtain. Nothing, just black woods and that sticky air pressing in. I stayed there a while, listening, trying to pick up on anything strange. But there was nothing. No engine.
No doors. No footsteps.
Just silence so thick it felt wrong. Eventually, I figured maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe they really had just backed out and left. So I got ready for bed. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. Gravel crunching under tires. But not on the main road. This was closer. Much closer. Like right at the bottom of my driveway. I walked back to the window, heart starting to thump now. Sure enough, there it was. A small sedan, silver or maybe light gray, crawling up toward the house with no headlights on. Just the faint reflection of moonlight bouncing off the windshield. Who the hell drives that far, that deep, with lights off? That's when I grabbed my rifle. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just didn't like surprises. I stepped out on the porch, didn't say a word, didn't yell. Just stood there in the shadows with the rifle across my chest, trying to see who was in the car. That's when the door opened. A woman stumbled out. Even in the dark, I could tell something was wrong. She was barefoot, hair tangled, limping. One of her arms was wrapped around her ribs, and she was moving like someone who'd been through hell. She took a few steps, looked up at the porch, then collapsed to her knees in the gravel. I looked past her, back at the car, and saw it. The driver's door was still shut. Someone was sitting in there, motionless. The engine was still running. I stepped off the porch and started walking toward her, slowly, keeping one eye on the car. I couldn't see the driver's face, just a shape, a silhouette behind the glass. No movement. The woman lifted her head, looked at me, and I saw it in her eyes. Pure panic. She was mouthing something, but I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. The message was clear. Help me. That was all I needed. I grabbed her under the arms, hoisted her to her feet, and half-dragged her toward my truck. The whole time I expected the driver's door to swing open, for someone to come charging out. But it never happened. They just sat there. I didn't think. I just acted. I shoved her into the passenger seat, climbed in, turned the key, and floored it. The tires kicked up a cloud of gravel and dust, and I tore down that driveway faster than I'd ever driven it. She was crying now, hands shaking, barely able to speak. Every time I checked the mirror, I expected to see headlights behind us, but they never came, not until we hit the main road. That's when I saw them again, those same pale headlights, bouncing down the gravel, coming fast. He'd waited, let us go, then followed. I don't know why. Maybe to see where we were headed. Maybe to make sure we didn't make it. That stretch of road was long and narrow, with tight curves and steep drop-offs. It wasn't made for speed, but I pushed the truck as hard as I could. 80, 90. My heart was pounding, sweat running down my neck, hands gripping the wheel so hard they went numb. The woman kept looking back, eyes wide, body trembling. I think she was trying to tell me something, but all I could focus on was the road and the headlights getting closer. We hit the blacktop and I didn't slow down. I knew that stretch well, 12 miles to the highway, then another 20 to the nearest hospital. I blew through stop signs. I crossed double yellow lines. Every time we passed a driveway or a side road, I checked the mirror. He was still there, always there, never backing off. I've never driven like that before, never since. We made it to the hospital in just under 20 minutes. I pulled right up to the ER doors, honked the horn, and a security guard came running out. They rushed her inside, and I told them everything. What I'd seen, where I lived, the car, the guy. They called the police. They never caught him. The car was stolen. The plates were fake. The VIN was filed down.
No fingerprints.
No cameras on that road. It was like he just vanished into the woods. Turns out the woman, her name was Jamie, had met the guy a month earlier. Online. They'd been dating. He'd seemed charming at first, then possessive, then violent. That night, he'd driven her out to talk. When she tried to leave, he hit her. She jumped out of the car, barefoot, and ran toward the first place with lights on.
Mine.
She stayed in the hospital for 2 nights. Broken rib, fractured ankle, and bruises all over. After she was released, she moved in with her sister 3 states away, changed her number, deleted her social media, started fresh. I haven't heard from her since, but I think about her more often than I want to admit. That was 6 years ago. I still live in the same house on the same road, but I keep the porch light on now. I check the locks twice before bed, and every time I see headlights come down that stretch of gravel, I stop what I'm doing and watch, because now I know, not everyone who comes down that road is lost, and not everyone gets away. I had always liked taking the long way back. There's something about empty roads through thick forest that clears my head, especially after long weeks stuck at work. For a few years, I was driving deliveries between small towns in eastern Oregon. Logging towns, scattered cabins, gas stations that closed at 6 p.m. The kind of places where people still wave at every car that passes, even if they don't know who's in it. This happened about 5 years ago. I was 28 then. I just finished a job dropping off equipment parts to a sawmill near John Day and decided to camp the night on my way home. There was a dirt road I knew that cut through a remote stretch of forest between Prairie City and Unity. No cell service, no homes, just 20-odd miles of trees and silence. I'd taken it before, and though it was rough in places, my Tacoma handled it fine. The plan was simple. Take the dirt road, find a pull-off where I could camp, cook dinner, maybe fish the next morning. I had a sleeping pad in the back, a camp stove, and enough food and water to stay out for a couple days. It was late afternoon when I turned off the main highway onto that dirt road. The sun hung low, casting long shadows through the pines. Dust trailed behind my truck as I climbed the first hill, and soon, I was alone. Just trees and road and sky. I rolled the windows down, let the cool air push through. I remember thinking how peaceful it all felt. Then, about 5 miles in, I saw her. At first, I thought it was just an animal by the roadside, maybe a deer stepping out. But as I got closer, I saw it was a person, a woman standing just off the shoulder. She was wearing a hoodie and jeans, her hair pulled back, maybe mid-20s. She didn't wave or call out. She just stood there, looking toward the road like she was waiting for something. I slowed, unsure what to do. It was weird, seeing someone out here on foot. There were no towns nearby, no hiking trails I knew of. I pulled to a stop a few yards ahead of her, still in my truck, and waited to see if she'd approach. She didn't move. She stood perfectly still, like she wasn't sure if she should come closer or not. I could see now that her hoodie was torn in one sleeve, and her shoes looked caked in dust. Her hands were hanging at her sides, and she kept shifting her weight, like she was cold or anxious. I thought about getting out, but something held me back. Something didn't feel right. I couldn't explain it at the time, just a gut thing. The way she stood, the way she didn't make eye contact, like she was acting. Eventually, I leaned over and grabbed a water bottle and a snack bar from the glove box. I rolled the window down and tossed them onto the ground a few feet away from the truck. Then I nodded, shifted into gear, and drove on. For the first half mile, I kept checking the rearview mirror. She never moved. That should have been the end of it. A strange, quiet moment on a lonely road, but it wasn't. About 10 minutes later, I found a spot to pull off, a wide shoulder where an old logging spur cut into the woods. I backed the truck in, put it in park, and got out. The forest was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels thick, like the trees themselves are holding their breath. I set up the camp stove on the tailgate, boiled water, made coffee, and sat on the edge of the bed to eat. I kept thinking about the woman. Something about her had been off. She wasn't just lost. I'd seen lost people before, hikers who missed a turn, drivers who ran out of gas. They had a look in their eyes, a certain alertness, even fear. She didn't have that. She looked like she'd been waiting. I finished eating, walked a little ways into the woods to stretch my legs, then came back and crawled into the bed of the truck. I left the tailgate down, just listening to the sounds of the forest. The breeze in the branches, the occasional snap of a twig far off, the chirp of birds settling for the night. It got cold fast. By 9 p.m., the light was nearly gone. I pulled my sleeping bag tighter and zipped the shell around me. No fire. I didn't want to draw attention, and there was no one out here anyway, or so I thought. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not to a sound exactly, but to a feeling, like someone was watching me. I laid still, not moving, just listening. There were footsteps, not loud, slow, careful. I reached quietly for the pistol I kept under my sleeping bag. It wasn't paranoia. I'd had run-ins before, once with a drunk guy at a trailhead, once with someone trying to break into trucks at a rest stop. You spend enough time alone in remote places, you learn not to take chances. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard a whisper of fabric, like someone brushing against a branch. I waited a full minute, heart pounding, breath held. Then I sat up fast, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. I swept the beam across the woods. Nothing, just trees and shadows. I jumped out of the truck bed and did a full circle around the campsite. Still nothing. No signs of tracks.
No smell.
No movement. Eventually, I climbed back in, left the flashlight beside me, and waited for morning. At dawn, I made coffee again, packed up, and got ready to leave. But when I stepped around to the driver's side, I froze. There was something tucked under my windshield wiper. Piece of paper, torn from a spiral notebook, folded twice. I opened it with shaking hands. There was no message, no writing, just a drawing. A crude, childlike sketch of a truck. My truck with a stick figure lying beside it, face down. That was enough. I jumped in, started the engine, and drove. Fast. I didn't stop to eat, didn't stop to drink, just kept driving until I hit pavement again. From there, I took the highway back to the nearest town and parked in front of the sheriff's office. They listened to my story, took the note, wrote down the details. But what could they do? No laws had been broken. The woman on the road, maybe she was just lost. The footsteps could have been an animal. The drawing, creepy but not criminal. They said they'd send someone to check the area, but I never heard back. That should have been it. But a few months later, I was back at work, on a different route near another patch of forest, when I stopped for gas. There was a guy standing by the mini-mart window, talking on the payphone. Looked like a local, dirty jeans, weathered face, long gray beard. He hung up as I walked in and looked at me with narrowed eyes. "You sleep in that truck?" I stopped. "Sometimes." He nodded. "You watch yourself out here. Lot of folks go missing in them woods. Not all of them are accidents." I didn't say anything, just bought my gas and left. But I thought about what he said the whole drive home. In the months after, I started reading missing persons reports. Not in newspapers, those don't cover small cases, but on forums, community boards, hiker blogs. I found a few names that stood out. 2 men, a year apart, vanished in the same general area I'd camped. No signs of struggle, no bodies found, just gone. One of them had left a note behind, just a post-it on his dashboard. It said, "Helping someone on the road. Be back soon." No one ever saw him again. Now, 5 years later, I still think about that woman. I think about the way she stood there, waiting, not asking for help. I think about the drawing left on my windshield, the footsteps in the dark, the silence in the trees. I wonder how many people drive by someone who looks like they need help and keep going. I used to think that was heartless. Now I'm not so sure. Sometimes people really are in trouble. But sometimes they're just pretending to be. And sometimes you don't get a second chance to find out which it is. I was lucky. That's all it was. Just luck. And I don't take that kind of chance anymore. It was just after 2:30 in the morning when I left work. I'd stayed way later than planned. One of those nights where everything just drags. Printer jams, late shipments, computer crashes, all of it. By the time I clocked out, my body was sore and stiff, and my eyes felt like they were coated in sand. I had at least a 45-minute drive home, maybe longer if I hit deer or fog on the back roads. I lived far outside town. It was cheaper, quieter, the kind of place where there were no streetlights for miles and the stars actually looked like something. Just woods, fields, and the odd porch light glowing in the distance if you knew where to look. Most nights I liked the drive. Peaceful, a buffer between the stress of work and the quiet of home. But that night, it felt different. I was tired enough that the road started to blur after the first 10 minutes, and I had to roll the windows down and let the cold air hit me just to keep alert. The route took me through a lot of nothing. Just trees on either side, tall and close to the road, leaning in overhead in places like they were trying to touch across the top. It was a narrow 2-lane road with no shoulder, just a rough lip of gravel and ditch before it dropped into thick underbrush. No place to pull over unless you wanted to risk a flat tire or getting stuck. I was about a mile from home when it happened. I came around a bend and suddenly there she was. A woman, covered in blood. She came out of the woods fast, crashing through the brush and stumbling onto the road like she'd been thrown. Her arms flailed, and she screamed, a raw, throat-ripping sound that cut right through the night. Her body was thin, her clothes torn, and blood streaked down her face, her arms, her shirt. I had less than 2 seconds to react. I swerved hard to the left, tires screeching as I went wide and around her. I almost hit the ditch, but corrected just in time and got back onto the road. My heart was pounding. I slammed on the brakes about 100 feet up, dust and gravel kicking up behind me. I just sat there for a moment, hands locked on the wheel, breathing like I just run a sprint. Every nerve in my body was electric. The reality of what I saw hit me all at once. She was hurt, bad, and alone, and terrified. I threw the car into reverse, backed up fast with one hand on the wheel and the other grabbing my phone. I rolled down the window and opened the door, leaving the engine running. The dome light lit up the road, but the forest was still pitch black beyond. She was standing in the middle of the road now, barefoot and shaking. Her eyes were wide, her mouth open, and her whole body seemed like it was vibrating. She looked behind her into the woods over and over again. That's when she staggered toward my car, limping, one hand clutching her ribs. She was still bleeding. The moment she got in, I could smell it. Blood, sweat, dirt, like she'd been running for miles. Her breathing was wild, uneven. She was saying something, but I couldn't focus on the words. My fingers punched the emergency number on my phone while I threw the car into drive and floored it. I told them what I could, where we were, what I saw. They asked if I could wait on scene. I told them no, I wasn't staying, because I saw him in the rearview mirror just before we turned the next bend. A shape, a man tall, moving through the edge of the trees, not running, not yelling, just walking fast, focused. He was after her. There was no way I was going to stop and wait with him closing the distance. No way I was putting myself in a position where he could get to us. I told the dispatcher that clearly, and she said officers would meet us at the hospital. That was still 15 minutes away, but I drove fast, faster than I ever had on those roads. I took corners sharp, blew through a stop sign at a four-way that never saw traffic after midnight, and kept checking my mirrors over and over again. My hands were shaking. The woman was curled up in the seat beside me, arms wrapped around her knees, still trembling, still bleeding. The blood was smeared on the door now, on the seat, on my jacket where she leaned for a moment. We didn't speak, not a word, just the sound of the engine, the wind from the cracked windows, and the hum of tires on broken pavement. The hospital lights came into view like a beacon. I pulled straight up to the emergency entrance, hazard lights flashing. She got out on her own, walked unsteady but fast through the sliding doors. Nurses met her just inside. Police were already there too, or maybe they arrived a minute later. I parked properly and gave them my statement in full. Every detail, from the moment I saw her to the second we pulled into the hospital lot. They took photos of the inside of my car. I let them. I didn't clean the blood, didn't touch anything. I wanted her to be safe. I wanted there to be proof. Afterward, I sat in the waiting room for almost an hour. Not because they needed me, but because I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not yet. I felt like I was still out there, still in the dark, still looking over my shoulder. Eventually, one of the officers told me they'd caught him. Her boyfriend. They didn't give me much more than that. Just enough to know he wouldn't be coming after her that night. Just enough to ease that edge off my nerves. The drive home was quiet, still dark, still empty, but it felt different now. Every shadow seemed thicker. Every stretch of woods felt closer, like the trees knew something, like the road itself remembered. I pulled into my driveway just before dawn. The birds had started. Faint calls in the distance. The sky was the color of steel wool. I sat in the car for a long time before going inside. The blood on my jacket had dried. I still hadn't changed. My body felt like it wasn't mine. I kept thinking about her face, the fear, the pain, the way she looked behind her like something was going to come out of the trees and drag her back. That road has never felt the same since. I still live there, still drive it every day. But every time I pass that stretch, I see it all over again. The bend, the flash of movement, the blood, the moment where everything could have gone wrong, but didn't. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't stopped. I don't want to think about it, but I did. And she's alive. And sometimes that's enough.